Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, I'm talking about the new moon in Aries, which takes place on the 1st of April. Now, I always look at a new moon or a full moon in a setting. I take into consideration all the other things going on at the time. And what I also do, and what I'm going to discuss this time, is the idea of the new moon cycle. Now, the new moon occurs and then it takes approximately 14 days, sometimes 50, sometimes a little less, depending on the time of the full moon that is to follow. We get the idea that as the moon waxes towards full, that's a whole cycle, and that the promise of the new moon is fulfilled in those 2 weeks, not just on the day itself, but in the 2 weeks that follow to full moon. And that's really important because when I'm talking, especially sign by sign a little bit later, it is important to bear in mind that everything that I talk about doesn't just have to happen on the 1st of April. It's got a bit of a cycle. It's going to take us through to the 16th of April. So you have to keep that in mind. And I'm going to show you how important new moon, full moon, and the cycle that they begin and end, if you like, in a short while. But first of all, I want to talk about the moon in Aries. Now, the new moon in Aries is the first new moon of the zodiac year. The zodiac begins with Aries, ends with Pisces, and Aries is all about new beginnings per se. Aries is the pioneer of the zodiac. It starts at the time of spring, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. And of course, as I never tire of telling everybody, in terms of how the zodiac and the seasons go, because Western astrology was developed, ancient Greece, ancient Babylon, Persia, this was a time when the seasons really were as the zodiac portrays them. So spring is in essence in the sign of Aries. So of course, all of us to a certain extent get an opportunity to have a spring clean, to feel as though we are starting over in some way. We're starting out on a 12-year cycle. And of course, wherever that new moon falls in our chart, that's the area that gets the maximum input when it comes to the idea of new starts. I mean, Aries is very good at kicking over the traces of the past, whether that means, let's live in the modern time, let's not be trapped in the past, but also getting over its mistakes and failures. It's both a blessing and a curse, because sometimes for Aries, it's good to be able to think, oh, that's done, can't do anything more about it, let's get on with the next thing, which is good and refreshing, but of course it can mean that you haven't given things enough time to really learn from them and perhaps modify or change or adapt accordingly. And that's one of Aries' faults, really. And when I talk about Aries, I'm talking about myself. So I feel justified in talking about its failings as well as its really virtues. There's plenty of virtues to Aries, and especially that idea of the warmth, the crackle of heat that comes with Aries, the enthusiasm, the confidence, and the drive. So these are all good Aries qualities, and that new moon brings that quality to all of us. Now, one of the things that I would like to do, and I don't want to spend a lot of time doing it, but it is in reference to this idea of a cycle, that a new moon brings in a 2-week cycle up to the full moon. And at full moon, there's another roughly 2 weeks to go before the new moon again, and things are waning. But that whole 2-week period is important for the message that that new moon or that full moon brings. And I want to illustrate this, particularly in the case of Russia and Ukraine, because the full moon that appeared just before the invasion of Ukraine was very important. And when we think about full moons, which are about closure and completion, things that are simmering, coming to the bubble, we often tie things up and say, we've done all that preparation, we're ready to go, but also things come to a head at full moon. Now I'm going to have a look at what that full moon meant in the chart of Russia, first of all. So here we are, let's take a look at that. And I think you can see the moon and the sun, the opposition there in red. That actually flanks the ascendant-descendant axis of Russia's natal chart. And not only that, it also picks up Russia's Venus-Pluto conjunction. And actually, as it happened, that's also ties in with Putin's chart as well. Putin has a midheaven with Pluto on it. And so this full moon said, that's it. We've done the preparation. We're ready to go. We've decided this is our move. Well, they didn't invade Ukraine on the day of the full moon, the 16th of February, but they did a few days later, during the time that the full moon was still in principle, you know, the pattern and the things reflected in that full moon were all active. So the full moon is important because when you look at it in a country's chart, or whether you look at it in your own chart, it's showing you there's crisis. Things have come to a head. Now, whether this, in this case, of course, falling on the angles of the chart, it's very powerful. And we know what happened, so when, you know, we can talk about it. If we look now instead at Ukraine's chart, and we look at where that full moon fell, here we have that full moon, if you look at it, on the Venus moon axis, the same sun in Aquarius, very close to the moon in Aquarius, and opposition to Venus in Leo, the full moon itself on the Venus-Mercury conjunction of Ukraine. So we know that this is being brought right into their experience. The full moon ends something, ends a chapter, and in due course, a new one begins. And we see that also in Ukraine's chart, it's picking up the midheaven and Pluto factor as well. So we see again clearly in this chart the idea of crisis. So come back to me again, because as we know, the 24th of February was the day of the invasion. And so all the portents in the chart of the full moon were brought to life, so to speak. And what is interesting is that on the new moon, which fell 2 weeks later, we had a Venus-Mars-Pluto conjunction. And I talked about this quite a lot in my Friday Bites because this has a very nuclear, plutonic kind of aura to it. And what, of course, happened was at that time, the nuclear power station was shelled. The Chernobyl nuclear plant had been taken over by the Russians. And there was a tremendous amount of fear that this might do something catastrophic in terms of a nuclear event. So we could see it in the astrology, we could see it in the new moon at that particular point. And that then went through to the full moon and so on and so forth. But I'm illustrating the astrology, helping you to understand that in your lives, a new moon or a full moon is about the following 2 weeks. So let's now have a look at this new moon itself and see if we can explore a little bit more about what this new moon is all about. I've talked about new beginnings. I've talked about the Aries nature and the spirit of this new moon, which is pioneering. We've got to also remember that Aries is the warrior of the zodiac. So we do get things to do with conflict. We also get things to do with sport and action and activity and things moving, things getting off the ground. And so this new moon really reflects all those kind of properties. Now, what's interesting about this new moon is that it is almost just on its own. It's not making a direct connection to any of the outer planets or the non-personal planets, that's Saturn and Jupiter. The only conjunction there is the conjunction to Mercury. The new moon is conjunct Mercury. It's also semi-sextile Uranus. As we look at those degree areas, we can see the sun and moon, 11 degrees, Uranus, 12 degrees. So we know there's a relationship here. In fact, this is called, well, it's a semi-sextile. It's a very apparently minor aspect, but we'll judge how minor this aspect is in the fullness of time. Before I get onto that and what it may mean, let's have a look at the whole idea of the sun and moon conjunct Mercury. Now, there is a belief in astrology that if Mercury is too close to the sun, we say it's combust. And that means that Mercury doesn't function properly. So if you've got Mercury within a degree of the sun, technically your Mercury isn't functioning very well. So you can be the judge of that if you have a combust Mercury. I have to say that in my years, decades of work, I haven't found that to be really true. But I like the idea of it in the sense, if you think that Mercury is so close to the sun, it's blinded by the sun. So in a way, its function doesn't work. We don't see the function so well. So maybe that's more to the point when we look at this Mercury conjunct this new moon. We may not fully understand all the implications surrounding it at the time, because in a way, the new moon is blinding us to the function of Mercury, which brings me on to this idea of the semi-sextile, which is Uranus. Does this mean, and we will test this hypothesis out, does it mean that there are complications with communications? Does it mean there are communication breakdowns? Does it mean that we've got problems with the internet? Have we got problems with hacking? Have we got various sites not working because they've been hacked? Are there problems generally to do with the internet? Are there problems to do with social media and all those things? Because that is incredibly Uranus. So although we get the promise of the new moon, which is like, hello, this is a new beginning, these are new things. Maybe there's new technology around. Maybe there's breakthrough technology that we're going to benefit from. But we cannot rule out the possibility that as well, we will have real problems to do with technology and the internet, and also things to do with explosive devices. So all of this should be kept in the mix as we look at this new moon, both at the time of the new moon, but also in the 2 weeks following. Now, if we also look at what else is in this mix, we can see that there's a cluster of planets, well, 3, a stellium, and we're looking at Mars conjunct Saturn conjunct Venus. So we've got a Saturn sandwich. We've got Venus and Mars on either side of Saturn. So this too is significant. If you remember in the new moon chart, the last new moon in Pisces, we had Venus and Mars, who've been quite close to each other, conjunct Pluto. Now they're conjunct Saturn. And incidentally, this whole little cluster of planets again connects to Russia's chart and Ukraine's chart. And I have to say, not in a good way. There is a lot of very difficult realizations to be made at this time with these aspects. And again, if we look a little bit closer to the time, we're looking at the Venus-Saturn conjunction on the 28th of March. We're looking at the Mars-Saturn conjunction on the 5th of April. So, this is as it's happening. We're having these dynamic influences really teed off at the time of the new moon. So I do think, even though Mars is a little far away from Uranus in this, you see Mars up close and personal on the midheaven in this chart, actually set we've set this chart here for Kiev. So this gives us quite, a good picture of what's happening there at the time. But we want to take into consideration that just prior to that time, Mars was square Uranus. It's still an aspect. So we do get this very explosive feel to this chart. And again, let's bring this into our own lives. Let's look at what may happen if that Mars, Saturn, Venus conjunction is near something in your own chart. Well, we're looking at consolidation on the one hand. Saturn is very, very good at bringing things together and making them real. And so Saturn is often something we embrace wholeheartedly when perhaps an endeavor we've worked very hard for and long for comes together. Often Saturn is the principle that we're looking at that time. But often too, when we look at Saturn for its brand of reality, we are facing situations we don't like, we've got results we don't like, and we wish they weren't the way they were. But of course, from there, new solutions have to be found, a new way forward has to be found. And certainly in regard to this, our new moon chart, we see that there is indeed a new way forward. There is a new moon in Aries telling us that we can go forward. So let's come back to me for a moment. And, I talk about not only the idea of the new moon cycle to full moon, but also that on a new moon, especially if you're on an Aries, then there is a 6-month cycle beginning, which will be completed at the time of the full moon in Aries in October, in fact, on October the 9th. So I think it's quite good to have a kind of conscious awareness of what these new moons and full moons mean, and in regard to the rest of the aspects that are there at the time, so that we were looking at consciously making new starts and giving them a 6-month lifespan, in the sense of maybe we are going to give something a go for 6 months, see where we are in 6 months' time in October, and if things have gone well and they're growing, we go forward. And if they prove to be a bit of a damp squib, wasn't really worth the effort, then we close them off at that full moon in October. So these are important, especially for the Aries and Librans, where we're looking at the new moon, full moon closure. And certainly if you're beginning or a relationship starts in this next couple of weeks, then there's going to be two important junctions, actually, one in 3 months' time, which brings us to July, and the other in the October period. And both of these are going to be points of assessment where we decide we have got something that is throbbing with life and going somewhere, or whether we've got something that's, a little bit more trouble than it's worth, and maybe it's wise to say enough is enough. So one of the other things that I want to mention in regard to this new moon period, we've also got Jupiter closing in on Neptune. So we've got a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. And this is an unusual conjunction. I'm going to be talking about it much more on my next video. I'm going to make a real point of talking about it, because on the one hand, this is a very spiritual conjunction. We look at Jupiter and Neptune for really an expansion of consciousness, possibly. We look at it for things like miracles, for things that are really, really amazing, and that kind of burst of feeling of, soul and heart, which Jupiter and Neptune can do, is a wonderful thing. But we always have to look at the opposite meaning, and Jupiter and Neptune can unleash chaos. Everything is escalating. We have no way of stopping it. It's running out of control. And this can be anything to do with the weather. It can be to do with nature and its sudden developments, or it can be indeed a global situation that is now escalating completely out of control. And we need to look at that in our own lives. We need to look at this point before we get there and see, is there anything in our lives that could do with checking right now? Is there something that is dangerously near to getting out of control? So now would be the time to set it to rights or put in measures that will help that. So here we go. Let's have a look at it sign by sign now. Now, as I mentioned already, a new moon in Aries, a new moon in your own sign, of course, is a new personal chapter. You could, of course, just wait and see what opportunities arise and what things just happen that reflect that idea of a new start for you. But consciously embracing it and thinking, looking around your life and thinking, where are there cobwebs? Where's there dust? What could do with a radical spring clean so that I can start fresh? This is in the most personal area of the horoscope, so it can affect your appearance. Is it that you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you think, you know, I could do with a new look? And of course, when we talk about a new image, that can apply to our work, especially if we use social media or anything like that, then brushing up our image, changing it can really bring a great refresher to the work we do and the things we want to promote. And it is good to get a new image, whether we buy a new item of clothing, whether we do something to our hair, whatever we do inspires us to do new things in a good way and to really sideline, at the very least, things that have, I talk about, you know, having cobwebs. What I think you want to be aware of, Aries, though, if we think back to looking at the new moon chart and its semi-sextile to Uranus, and also that cluster of planets, including your ruling planet, Mars, there is a warning here to be very, very careful of the actions you take. Yep, you may want to do new things. You may be full of enthusiasm. You may also be frustrated and fed up and just want to do anything to change it, which I would guard against. And think specifically about things that are Uranus ruled. So we're back looking at things to do with the internet, machinery, devices we use that a computer run. These are all a little bit risky around this time to problems, let's put it that way. Now, if we look at Libra, then this new moon takes place in your 7th house. So we're in the area of relationships, and it means a new start for a relationship or a new start generally for relationships. And this is a really, really good thing. I mean, so often we're so busy in life. We have so many things to do, so many drains on our time. We don't actually get to sit down and think, you know, our relationship could do with some kind of fresh air in it. It could do with some changes and a new look. So consciously thinking about what needs to be brought into your relationship life that's going to stimulate it and make it grow stronger and better. But of course, you know, we stretch that out because it isn't just a relationship like a marriage or a live-in long-term relationship. It can be your relationship with a company. So we're looking at someone you work for or a business partnership. So there are many ways in which this idea of relationships can get a fresh start. But we can also look at the idea of a new relationship beginning. Does it begin on the 1st of April? Or does it start in this 2-week cycle where things to do with new relationships are really all possible? So the meeting of someone new, the development of an existing working relationship to something more than it was, an offer from a company, something along these lines could be symbolized by that new moon. Now, the other thing to look at here in terms of new moon starts for Cancer is that the 10th house is in focus. And the 10th house has a lot to do with your place in the world. And although you could say, oh, well, the place in the world is where I live, what I'm really talking about is your place out there in what you do, your role in life, the things you do out of the house in a way, the things you do on your stage of life, whatever it is. Your role in life may be a nurse, your role in life may be a writer, your role in life may be a parent, can be many, many things. So the new moon in the 10th house shows there is a new dimension coming in terms of your role in life, but not just that. but your future generally. And again, I come back to the idea of not just sitting and waiting for new things to happen, for new job opportunities, or for talks to happen at the instigation of authority figures which affect your future, but for you yourself to sit down and look at your future and think, where am I going? What am I doing? If I want certain things to happen in my life, if I want to be this person or do that thing, is where I am right now going to take me there? And if the answer is no, then this is the time to bring about new routes towards your goals. And of course, we can never forget there is that idea that something new begins all by itself. But let's not just leave it to the cosmos. Let's also make a concerted effort to bring something new into our role in life. For Capricorn, this new moon is at the base of your chart. So we are on home territory. And this is a good new moon because it really sets in motion a big 12-month cycle. And if the things that are happening to you at this time, and I think a little bit about Easter that's coming up in the future. All right, there will be a full moon on Easter Sunday, but actually the run up to Easter, which is when a lot of people are going away, are already joining family and friends, that's way before the actual full moon and Easter day. This idea of a new beginning can have a really powerful effect on your family. I mean, maybe there's been some stresses and strains in the family and people aren't talking about it. They just want it all to get better, or, whatever it is. This is a really good opportunity in these next couple of weeks to knock heads together, to talk about family first and strengthening the family. It's a really positive action to take. And you may find that it just happens anyway. As I said, Easter is often a time people come together as families and as friends. And, the spirit of what we do at Easter, that Easter egg, the new beginning, is, implicit in that festival. We're also looking at homes. Maybe you're thinking about moving. Maybe it's time to move and you're already got packing boxes, and that new moon is signaling your new home. But it can also mean it's time to give the home a new look. And you can do that by painting it. You can do it by adding something into your home environment, or you can paint, decorate, something in your home that gives you a sense of it's looking new. It's a real shock, a positive shock to the psyche, always good to do. And this new moon can also augur new developments in the family, new people in the family, whether they're coming in as babies or they're coming in as by marriage or by love, if you like. They're adding to the family. If we come to Pisces next, then we're looking at the new moon in the second house. If you think about it, Pisces, Aries is your next door neighbor, moving around the zodiac. So the next house is now being illuminated by the new moon. So this is all about your self-worth. And often, if we're thinking about money, I mean, of course, money isn't the most important thing in the world. Of course not. Love is the most important thing in the world. We all know that. But we're not going to get very far without money. We need a roof over our heads. We need to be able to live life. And this new moon is all about those concerns and about the idea of making your money go further, of getting more money in, of doing things, investing in your own talent to make money, which might mean getting a little entrepreneurial. And of course, it may mean there is a new source of income coming to you, or some kind of raise or some kind of development linked to your income that's different. Self-worth, of course, that's all about how we value ourselves. And I often think we bandy about this idea of, you've got to love yourself in order for people to love you. And yet every time we say that, we think, well, surely isn't that a bit self-centered? Isn't that a bit selfish? But I think if we think about value, if we are aware of our value as a person, or what we do in life, what we work for and deliver and give out, then we're right to want to have a strong sense of our self-worth. And of course, when our self-worth is strong, we don't get messed around by people. So if you're listening to me and you're thinking, I'm really having a difficult time being paid what I deserve for the work I do, or I'm not being valued by the people I'm in a relationship with, then bring it back to you and think, well, what is it here that you're not affirming? What is it that needs to grow in you, in your sense of self-esteem? That means people won't muck you about, and they will pay you and give you what you deserve. Food for thought, Pisces. If we come to the opposite sign and we look at Virgo, my goodness, we're in the 8th house here. That's still got a financial aspect to it. But rather than the money you earn and the money you make, it's more about the financial arrangements that you make. So that means your relationship with credit card companies, banks, lending institutions, and also partners, whether they're business partners or whether they're life partners. You have a relationship and money relationship with them. So this means new things coming in, new agreements, new plans, new starts, and it's a good thing. It may also mean money coming to you, not from your source of, doing things, but someone else's. So could it be a settlement finally? Whether that's a redundancy settlement, or there's been an argy-bargy and you're due a settlement financially, or is it that you're coming out of a relationship and there needs to be a financial settlement? Well, this new moon is going to go a long way to, making that happen. But let's not forget all those other aspects that were in there. Uranus, surprises, the unexpected. And so that needs to be built into your expectations of what this new moon may mean. Of course, this is the area of intimacy as well. In as much as, when we're looking at the 2nd house, we think about what we're giving, what we're worthy of. Well, in the 8th house, it's sort of what we share or what others give to us. So it is about what we're getting from relationships, what we're getting from a sexual relationship, how thriving is our intimate life. So this new moon could indicate a new sexual, intimate relationship, or something of a rebirth for an old one. Okay, bear that in mind, Virgo. So next we come to Gemini, and Gemini's new moon is in the 11th house. So the 11th house is this very kind of collaborative area of the horoscope. This is where we join together with other people, often for a common purpose. So it can apply to work, teamwork. Lots of jobs entail working in teams. So this may be a shot in the arm for the team you're in. Think about that in terms of sport as well. This idea of new blood, a kind of new broom sweeping clean, but also new projects, new team members, new entrepreneurial starts. So all of this in the 11th house can mean all these or signal all these things. But one of the really important things about the 11th house, it's about fulfillment as well, because in the 10th house, the house before it, we're all there trying to, get our place on the world stage, if you like, or getting our place in the world and really working at developing who we are. Well, when we're in the 11th house, it's like, was it all worth it? All that effort. Am I happy? Is this what I really wanted to do? Does this mean anything? So it has a lot to do with the meaning of things, this 11th house, and it has a humanitarian meaning too. And of course, when we think about recent events and everything that is going on in Ukraine, if this wasn't ever a time to get humanitarian and to see what you can do for your fellow man, then there is no better time. And that new moon is a sort of call for arms. It sort of plucks at your humanitarian heartstrings. But of course, as well, it can mean new entrepreneurial ventures and working together as a team. And remember, in a relationship, a one-on-one relationship, if you think of yourself as a team, you are definitely going to be stronger. When we think of ourselves as two team members pulling together for a single goal, that can turn a relationship in trouble into a successful alliance. Come to the opposite sign, and we're here with Sagittarius in the 5th house, a very, very creative zone. This is where we give of ourselves in a creative way. Now, we can be creative, as I often say, in the kitchen. We can be creative with finances. We can be creative with pots and paint, and we can write. There's so many. We can sing. My goodness, lots of things we can feel creative with. And I would strongly recommend, with that new moon in this 5th house, Sagittarius, is that you get creative, especially if you're going through a really rough patch and you're not very happy about life, and you keep plugging away, trying to turn a wrong into a right, or trying to get things moving. Sometimes the best thing you can do is throw yourself wholeheartedly into a creative project or into activity like sport and competitive games. This will feed that part of you that, gives you back your power and also your optimism. So that's a very good tip, related to this new moon. But the new moon, creativity, can mean procreativity as well. So it may be that a new baby is expected in the very near future, maybe even on the day. Or does it mean that the actions you take will lead to a baby in the future? Quite possible. But of course, we can become a grandparent or a godparent. We don't necessarily have to become a parent. But there's something to do with children and babies in this new moon, and new starts and unexpected developments linked to the little things in life. So our final group now, the fixed signs, we're going to start with Taurus, and we're going to look at the 12th house. Aries is your preceding sign. So this new moon is the last one before you get one in your own sign, which incidentally on the 30th of April is going to be a solar eclipse. So it's a mega new moon for you. And we will certainly be talking about that in our video after the next one. We're going to be focusing on that. So this new moon, I think we should look at the new moon in Aries as part of that story. So the new moon is very much in the 12th house, things to do with the unconscious mind, things we're not necessarily seeing consciously. They're in our peripheral vision. They manifest later. So this is both a time where you may feel something is going to happen. You may even say those words, I'm just sensing something's going to happen. Something is around the corner. And that is definitely that new moon in the 12th house of your solar chart. It's telling you your spider sense is aware of something new coming in. But sometimes this can also be a sense of fear. In the 12th house, the house of shadows, we often see things not very clearly, so we become rather alarmed about them. So the shadows seem rather threatening, whereas in fact they're not. It's just our perception of them. So at this time, do your level best not to let fears escalate, and get a kind of, balance on that. And remember that often things that seem one way when they're in the 12th house look very different by the time the sun has come into your own sign, which it will do on the 20th of April, before the new moon 10 days later. So all of these need bearing in mind at this new moon time. Seeds that you plant are important. So if you're preparing to do something, this is a good period to do that. And think of that analogy of planting seeds, taking plants, so that they will bloom a little later in the year. Even do that, even if you've only got a window box, or you haven't got a window box at all, you've got a home with a place near the window or the radiator. Plant some seeds, bring a plant from its smallest part and watch it grow, because this new moon is about that. It's about seeds that grow into blooms further down the line. If we come to Scorpio, we've got the new moon in the 6th house, and the 6th house is much more than the sum of its parts, okay, if I've got that right. We've got sort of little names that go with the 6th house. It's like work and health. Well, figure that one out. What's work got to do with health? So look at it this way. We're looking at what I call systems. You have a health system and you have a work system, in the sense that doing work allows your life system to work, because by working, you earn money and your life runs. That's the system by which your life runs. It's also about your daily life and the things that are in your world that help it run or don't help it run. So this new moon is about, I need a whole new system. And maybe it is about health. Maybe it is about some new start, you know, whether it's getting fitter and stronger, whether it's a new treatment, whatever it may be. That new moon is about a whole new look at your health and fitness levels. But it's also about the health of your life. You know, how healthy is your life? Is it functioning well? Do things run well or not? If not, then it's time for new routines and a sweet clean of the way your life runs. This area of the chart is also about life purpose. So it may be, if you're listening to me and thinking, you know what, I sometimes wonder what I'm here for. Why am I here? And we could say that the 6th house tells us why we're here. It gives us purpose, especially in relation to what we do for other people, what we do in the sense of a devotional thing, but also where we find our sense of purpose. And that is going to differ from, you know, Scorpio to Scorpio, but it's in the 6th house and this new moon and the passage of the Sun and Mercury and Venus and Mars through this area, that something related to your life purpose is revealed. So here we come to our final 2 signs. I apologize for my itchy nose. My mother used to say, somebody is talking about you, when my nose would itch. So maybe that's the case. Aquarius. We're looking at the 3rd house. So the 3rd house is all about communication, information being gathered, received, and information given out. So this new moon means new information, not just random information, you know, but purposeful information that you can use. It may signal a new course that you're going to be going on. And there's so many courses out there we could choose. I mean, if you're young enough, well, maybe it's a university course, or maybe it's something related to your education. But if you're older than that, it could be, well, even doing a driving course, or it could be anything. The idea of a new course that's going to add to your skills, add to your knowledge, is a very, very good thing to actively embrace on a new moon in this area. But this idea too of information coming to you that you can use practically, that it gives you access to something that you can use immediately. That's important. It isn't something you're going to be using 10 years hence. It's now. So this area of the chart is also about a very localized feel to both information gathering and receiving, learning, educating, all of that kind of thing, have to do with your neighborhood as well. So this new moon could mean there's something happening in your neighborhood, and maybe you're going to be part of it. And it may be a good opportunity to get involved in your neighborhood activities. And I know this is a little bit, you know, personal here. Here I am living in England, and we've got the Jubilee coming up in June. This would be a great time to get involved with your local events and schemes, whether it's a street party, whatever it is. This new moon is a great opportunity to get involved with your neighborhood and to do things in a localized sense. It might also have to do with your siblings, if you're lucky enough to have a brother and sister. It may mean that there's some new development linked to them, or maybe you're going to be doing something with a sibling. And if you don't have siblings, I don't have siblings, but I have a few friends who I feel are like siblings. They're brothers and sisters to me. And that applies to those friends too. So something about those friends is new news, so that you'll be doing something with them or related to them as we go through this 2-week cycle, or the beginnings of something that takes root in this 2-week cycle. Finally, here we come to Leo, and we're looking at the new moon in the 9th house. So this has to do with far horizons, things that are far afield. And we could just take a very simple look at this and think, well, there's a new opportunity arising in a distant place. But it's not just about distances in miles. It's about things happening further down the line, or things in a very lofty kind of perspective, so that we're looking out and thinking about the future and about things that you're now working towards. So you've got a 10-year plan, you've got a 5-year plan, and you're thinking about all the things along the route to that. And this is a good time to think about, where am I hoping to be in 10 years? And here I am right now. You know, it's a little bit like the 10th house, but different, because the 9th house is more about the imagination, the really big hopes and plans that you have, the things that are going to give you some kind of factor that is very kind of, it's a factor of life, the 9th house, that widens your horizons. It expands your horizons. It's where you raise the bar. It's where you just go out of reach. And of course, we can do that by traveling as well. So if this new moon here may signal a journey quite some distance in the future, so that what you're going to be doing in this new moon cycle is putting it together, getting it all sorted. Or for some Leos, it's actually the journey is here. But of course, we make journeys in terms of experience and knowledge, and that cannot be left out here of this new moon, a new journey in knowledge and experience. And that can even be one of the biggest journeys we make, of course, is in a relationship. So that may apply in this case as well, but it needs to be thought of as a journey and not as an end in itself. The journey there is what's important. So there we go. There is my roundup of all 12 signs. And if I come back to this idea of Aries and the new, the beginning, the way we attack our life in that Aries fashion, that kind of innocent enthusiasm, which is so much part of the Aries nature. We need a dollop of that, don't we? We need to be fearless. We need to have a sense of pioneer spirit within us. We need to embrace that in that new moon, in a small or large way. So I'm sort of coming around to, how I like to end my videos off. And I'm thinking again quite a lot, because of all the mail that I get and the email I get and the conversations that I have. And of course, we do think about fate, don't we? A lot. I mean, when something happens, we're either in the right place at the right time, or we're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And astrology appears to be so wrapped up in fate. But that's not all it is. I mean, when something happens and we are in the right place at the right time, or we are in the wrong place at the wrong time, there is a sense that destiny meant us to have that happen. But that's not the important thing. Yes, the event is important, but what's really important is the choices we make thereafter. So again, this aligns with that very, oft quoted quote, the fault lies not in our stars, but in ourselves. So again, we're bringing it back to ourselves. And often in situations where we initially feel helpless and we feel that we don't have an option, or we've arrived at a crossroads and we don't know which way to turn, the answer lies within us. And it's in recognizing that and empowering ourselves to make that decision that then takes us to the next place along our destined route. Yes, the event may be our destiny, but what we do with it is our free will operating to change patterns in our lives. Patterns can be changed. They're difficult to change, and I'm often talking about this with my clients who recognize they're in a pattern. They can be changed. It takes effort and it takes a great deal of faith. What it also takes are leaps in the dark and that pioneering sense of, right, this has happened, I'm going forward. I don't know what lies ahead, but I've got the strength, the determination, the energy, the enthusiasm, and the determination to make the next step. And so that's really my sort of concluding thought. And it always does, in a way, come back to us. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time in a couple of weeks. Take care.